One of the issues that keeps coming up is housing affordability.
Yeah.
First of all, do you own your own home?
I do.
And what about recreational use of cannabis?
The Law Commission has really given a bit of a pointer to New Zealand about where that debate should go.
Are you going to be the next Prime Minister of New Zealand? I'm here for Vice. My name's Shamina. I'm here with Jacinda Ardern, Labour Party leader, up in the Vice studio on K Road. Many young people feel like owning their own home is
just feels out of reach.
Out of reach,
yeah,
exactly.
Absolutely. And that's not just Auckland. You know, I've got friends who have really struggled in other parts of the country. You know, Wellington has really shot off as well. You know, and so that's why we talk a lot about the efforts that we want to make to try and make housing affordable. Part of the problem is that the Auckland market isn't providing those first homeowner style homes. You know, the average house that's being built in Auckland is closer to 200 square metres than it is 100, and so by default the price tag attached to those is pretty high. Our view is that we actually need to just get into the market ourselves as government. You know, our plan through Kiwi Build is that 10,000 homes a year is the number that we would like to build, and we want 50% of those to be over 10 years in Auckland. And there'll be a mixture of apartments, townhouses and homes, but all of it's about trying to get home ownership going in the other direction, because it has continued to decline over the last 9 years.
Many young people feel like the future is debt. You know, they've got the high cost of housing for one, as well as a massive student loan. What will you do to help graduates?
Yeah, and I certainly understand that plight. In fact, you know, I remember when I went into university in 1999, there was still interest on loans while you were studying. Education is a public good. You know, I believe we all benefit from it. The people who continue their education, they end up paying in the long run more tax. We all benefit from their skills. We increase our productivity. It's a win-win. So our policy has been to phase in 3 years worth of free education. And my hope with that is that we do start bringing down those debt levels, because yes, while a lot of young people will still be borrowing to live, they at least will be getting rid of that expense of their fees.
So many people are afraid about automation taking their jobs. I mean, what do you have to say to those people?
This new generation of workers are having to cope with the idea that it will be a much more collaborative work environment. They're more likely to have to cobble together different jobs. They might be working, you know, remotely and be up against a labour force market that doesn't just exist domestically. But they are in amongst all of that, still looking for some certainty and some job security. So we looked at what we can do as government to try and prepare for that, but ultimately how we can keep helping that workforce retrain, constantly develop, and education no longer be just a destination, but something we all dip in and dip out of.
Probably the biggest issue for our generation is climate change. Is it too late to do anything?
No, and I refuse to accept this idea that we somehow, as a small nation at the bottom of the world, that we don't need to carry our own responsibility or our own contribution. And in part, you know, that's also because we should have a sense of responsibility to our Pacific neighbours. You know, they are going to be some of the nations that bear the early brunt of inaction on climate change, particularly Kiribati and Tuvalu. I also think there is a massive opportunity here for New Zealand. You know, we trade and pride ourselves on the clean green image, and yet when it comes to climate change, we've allowed ourselves to be fast followers. You know, if we were leaders, then we could also be leaders in the innovation space. There's a way that we can build this into an economic opportunity for New Zealand as much as anything else. So, no, it's not too late. And in fact, you know, I think that we should grab onto this in the same way that we did when we were anti-nuclear, when we were anti-apartheid, really carve out a reputation for ourselves around it.
What are your views on cannabis?
When the question of medicinal cannabis use first came up, I indicated that that was something I would support and continue to support.
And what about recreational use of cannabis?
The Law Commission has really given a bit of a pointer to New Zealand about where that debate should go. They've really promoted not decriminalisation, but a warning-based system that basically says, look, let's again use a health-based approach, but let's use a 3-stage one, so that eventually, you know, if there's repeated use there, you end up in a end up in rehabilitation or support rather than criminalisation. And we've always said, because it is a conscience vote, we'd like to see Parliament debating some of the Law Commission recommendations because it's a good starting point for that conversation.
What's your favourite 90s song?
Oh, my favourite 90s song? Oh gosh, there's so many to choose from. There was a period where I was deeply conflicted between, listening to a lot of Tool and Smashing Pumpkins, and then on the flip side, as a Mormon, Casey and JoJo and Boys to Men. So yeah, a lot of diversity in probably some of my early music taste. Yeah.
And so, kind of on that note, how do you feel your Mormon background has influenced you?
Yeah, I mean, it's probably, from a really early age meant that, I was quite empathetic, but it also taught me that actually there was a hierarchy to my beliefs a little bit. So when there was a bit of conflict between what my church believed and what felt right to me around equality, I just had to go with what felt right. So yeah, one of the trigger points for me leaving was civil unions. I was campaigning really hard for people to have the right to a civil union, and that really won out for me. I still have a lot of respect for people, though I'm not a religious person myself. I consider myself agnostic. Yeah, lots of respect for people who do have that in their lives.
After the US elections last year and the treatment of Hillary Clinton, are you worried that a similar level of sexism exists in politics in New Zealand?
I think we've come a long way. I constantly kind of check back on, my experience relative to some of the people who've gone before me. So, people like obviously Helen Clark, and I think I have a much better time than what I've seen in the past from past experiences. And even listening to some of the stories like Annette King, who's the longest standing female member of Parliament, some of what she's seen, and we have come a long way. We can always improve. And in fact, we can always improve across a range of workforces, and it's not just present in politics, the areas that we need to improve. So, I'm not going to sit back and say it's perfect, but it's a lot better than where it has been.
Will a Labour government join the US if it declares war on North Korea?
Yeah, I mean, my perspective at the moment on this, as someone, I've talked a little bit about, as a young person, becoming really aware of our international position as a country against the use of nuclear weapons, against proliferation, and really being the voice of calm internationally. And I think that's the role we need to keep playing. It serves no one to have this escalating rhetoric. And so that's the role I hope to see New Zealand keep playing. When it comes more broadly to international conflict, we've always tended to look to the UN for guidance on where the international response should be on conflict. But in the meantime, just calling for that de-escalation. That's I think who we are as a country, and again standing up strongly against the use of nuclear weapons as we have consistently done.
What world leader do you most admire?
I'd go close to home. I'd call Helen Clark a world leader. Yeah, huge amount of admiration. And your admiration, of course, when you work close to someone and you see them in action, just increases. And so I had the privilege of seeing her in action, so I can't help but admire what she did. And then to go on and become one of the most powerful women in the world for a time as the head of the UNDP was enormous.
So just as a final question, are you going to be the next Prime Minister of New Zealand?
Yes.
You are?
There is no point going through 9 years of opposition politics and the intensity of a campaign unless you're absolutely committed to taking that top job. And all the things I've ever been driven by in politics, we're only ever going to achieve if we're in a position of power. And I can tell you that no one goes into politics with the aspiration of being in opposition. It doesn't feel constructive. You're not making positive change. And so the end goal is always to eventually be in a position to win.